Flounder fishing is prized by anglers for a number of good reasons. First of all, they are widespread and relatively common throughout their range. But the best part is that they are willing to take a wide variety of baits, both natural and artificial. But they also have their own challenges. The pros in the game all have their favorite flounder fishing techniques, so if you want to learn how to fish for flounder, take their advice, whether it's about the best flounder fishing rigs, the best baits and lures for flounder, or when and how to find and catch them. We spoke to some of the best flounder anglers to get their tips on how to catch flounder. Flounder fishing isn't rocket science, but it's good to know a few tips and techniques to give yourself an edge on the water. Flounder fishing techniques range from dropping live bait or cut bait along the bottom to using artificial bait in the water column. Key techniques include dropping bait, or lures to the bottom. That's where flounder live and feed for most of their lives. Jake Marcus of Fairhope, Alabama, is a devoted flounder angler. His flounder setup typically includes light tackle and mostly quarter-ounce jigs, and his specialty is working sandbars and small inshore ledges that many anglers overlook. Flounder are associated with the smallest of slopes, sometimes as little as 6 or 8 inches, and a ledge a foot or two high can be a real fish magnet, he explains. I use a boat to get to the main fishing spots, but I find that wading is often the best way to reach flounder in shallow water. Wading doesn't spook the fish, and you can use your feet to feel the small slopes that often hold fish. Jake uses a fan to cast into these drop-off areas, probing the bottom with a jig as his first choice for flounder bait. Casts parallel to the ledge are often most effective because the bait stays in the strike zone during the retrieve. Jake also points out that ledges are best fished when the current is moving from shallow to deep. In this case, flounder often congregate on the deep side of the ledge, waiting for bait to be washed off the shallows. Greg Fields of Atlantic Beach, Florida, first learned about flounder tracks when he noticed that the bays with the most bait at low tide also had a large number of flounder shapes, or tracks, on the bottom. Sam Hudson. Guide Greg Fields of Atlantic Beach, Florida, first learned about what he calls flounder tracks while wading through shallow mud and sand at low tide in search of live bait. He found that the bays that had the most bait at low tide also had a lot of flounder silhouettes on the bottom. When the tide went out, the flounder that had been buried on the bottom rose, leaving body prints that helped Fields know where to look when the tide came back. I identified some hot spots by walking the mud flats at low tide, he explains. The flounder prints were incredibly prominent, and were a sure sign that there were fish there at high water. The flashing rig is simply a modified version of the standard fish finder rig that many flounder anglers use to work with live bait. It's especially popular with North Carolina flounder anglers, including Captain Booger Harris of Pantego. Like a basic fish finder, this flounder rig starts with a line threaded through an egg, bullet, or flat lead, which is then tied to a barrel swivel. Next, a 2-foot length of mono that is lighter than the main line is tied to the opposite end of the barrel swivel. A light-colored foam float or cork is placed about a foot from the end of the line. Some floats have a plastic stopper on the end for secure positioning, and yellow or red floats are preferred. A few small, red plastic beads are threaded onto the line, followed by a small chrome or brass swivel. Many anglers prefer Colorado hooks because they create a lot of vibration that attracts flounder, but willow or Indiana hooks can also be used. A pin can be used to facilitate the rotation of the hook. Finally, a few more plastic beads are threaded onto the line and tied onto a suitable hook, such as a KL10. The float keeps the bait off the bottom, where it is more likely to be detected by the fish and is more visible. In addition, the bright color of the float helps attract flounder, as does the swivel. The beads allow the hook to rotate freely on the line without getting caught on the hook, cork, or tangled in the line. Of all the famous flatfish, none is more beloved than the flounder. When you catch them, you're in for a treat. They're fun to catch, there's a lot of them, and they make great dinners. It's no wonder flounder fishing is popular across the country. Flounder go by many different names, so depending on where you're fishing, you might hear nicknames like flukes, often used along the East Coast, and flatties, while the larger ones are commonly referred to as doormats. But what makes them so special, and why should you try this classic coastal fish? What's the best way to catch them? We'll answer all of these questions, so keep reading. If you've never seen a flounder before, chances are you're imagining the adorable cartoon character from The Little Mermaid. The reality is quite different, so don't be surprised if you catch this strange brown creature with bulging eyes and sharp teeth. There are 3 types of flounder that you can catch along the coast of the United States: summer flounder, winter flounder, and southern flounder. Summer flounder are called flukes, and they live throughout the Atlantic, from the Chesapeake Bay, up to Maine, and even farther north. Winter flounder share territory with their summer cousins, and you can often find both in the same places.
The main difference. Flukes have eyes on the left side of their heads,
while winter flounder have eyes on the right. Finally, there's the southern flounder, which prefers the warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the southern Atlantic. Want to catch all three? Head to one of the Carolinas, where all three species live and thrive. Flounder are notorious ambush predators. Their dark brown color, flat shape and eye position make them very effective hunters. Opportunistic feeders to the core, these guys bury themselves in the sand or mud bottom, waiting for unsuspecting prey to swim by. Then they pounce. That's why the number one rule when fishing for flounder is to let your bait or lure bounce along the bottom. This can prove to be a difficult task as they like to hide and hunt around underwater structures. Look for rocks, piers, bridge piers, docks or fallen trees in coastal waters and you'll find your target. Flounder congregate around strong currents as the fast-moving water provides them with food. You see, they're not the most hardy fish. If you're beach fishing, work your bait around shallow water holes, sandbars, oyster beds, mudflats and cliffs. Wading fishermen chase flounder across flat grass flats just a few feet above the surface. That doesn't mean these flounder stay away from deep water. You can score some impressive doormats fishing wrecks both inshore and offshore. Anywhere there's some hideable bottom structure and plenty of bait fish around, there will be flounder. One of the many reasons flounder fishing is so appealing is that you can target them almost year-round. Whether it's spring, summer or fall, these flounder are ready to devour your offering. A middle-aged fisherman with a grey beard, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, holds a flounder he caught. The truth is that if there are bait fish around, flounder will feed day and night. One thing everyone agrees on is that the flounder bites best on the high tide. Smaller flounder will come out to play under the cover of night, while the largest ones will feed just after sunrise and sunset. When it comes to seasons, spring sees flounder return to shallow water after their winter offshore hiatus. Keep an eye out for their favorite food and you'll soon be catching them. This is the time to hit the flat grass and catch a flounder a few feet deep. The action around piers, bays and jetties is great. Early summer is probably the best time to fish for flounder. With higher temperatures, flounder will move out of the shallows, but still stay inshore. The sweet spot for inshore anglers is water as deep as 30 feet. During the warmest months, the bite is strong both inshore and offshore. Fall means unpredictable weather but also brings the fall flounder run. On their way to offshore shelters, flounder will devour anything they come across, including your bait. Brave the elements and your sacrifice may be rewarded. Things slow down in the winter because flounder are less active and harder to find, especially since this is their spawning season. That doesn't mean it can't be done, it just requires a little more patience and skill. It's time to dig deeper into the technical tips that will help you catch flounder. If you're into shore fishing, you've got everything you need for a successful day of fishing. An older fisherman in a fishing cap and sunglasses sits in a boat, holding a large flounder. Flounder come in a variety of sizes, anywhere from 1 pound to 20 pounds, although most average 2 to 4 pounds. To tackle them, you'll need a 7 to 8 medium action rod paired with a 2500 to 4000 series reel. Add 10 to 20 pounds braid, a 10 to 20 pounds leader, and you're ready to go. Now, a word of advice. As we mentioned, flounder like to hunt around underwater structure. The chances of your tackle getting snagged or broken on rocks or debris are high, so be prepared for that and don't give up. You don't want this to stop your fishing streak, so make sure you have all the necessary gear with you. When you go flounder fishing, you can use both lures and live bait to attract their attention. As ambush predators, they will jump on anything that moves, so you want your bait to be enticing. You'll be fishing on the bottom, so your bait should always be dragging or bouncing off the bottom. Remember that a flounder strike isn't an explosive strike, so you should be extra careful to spot a bite. Correct bait placement is equally important, as you want to cast within sight of the fish without spooking them. For live bait, we recommend using whatever bait fish is abundant in the area. Mullet, shrimp, mud skippers, and pinfish are some popular options that can help you catch something to be proud of. When you feel the pull, wait about 10 seconds before hooking. That way, your flounder can actually bite and stay. Artificial baits are just as effective as live bait, some say even more so. Since the lateral line on the flounder's body allows it to detect vibrations, you need artificial baits with lots of movement and a strong scent. Jig heads and soft plastics, like Berkeley Gulp, work wonders. If you're fishing in deep water, a strong-smelling deertail, mullet or shrimp, is a good choice. Flounder have a sensitive palate, so they quickly figure out that the artificial doesn't feel right and release it. That's why you should set the hook as soon as you feel a bite on your line and avoid losing the fish. Once you're hooked, the battle can begin. Let's move on to some of our favorite rigs that make flounder fishing magic. Jigging along the bottom is the best way to entice flounder to bite, but you'll need the right tools. Luckily, flounder fishing doesn't have to be complicated to be effective. Check out this video for a step-by-step video tutorial on flounder fishing. Live bait anglers like to pair it with a Carolina rig, also known as a fish finder. You'll need an egg-sized weight, sliders, half an ounce is best, and a two-way swivel to ensure the bait stays on the bottom. In addition, you'll add about a foot of leader along with a small hook for your live bait. This setup is versatile and works whether you decide to leave it on the bottom, plugged in, or slowly reel it in, making sure it bounces off the bottom as you go. When it comes to artificial lures, you can't go wrong with a jig head. The size of the jig head depends on the depth of the water. If you're fishing shallow water, 2 to 5 feet, a 1/4 of an ounce jig head will work like a charm. Wading anglers go even lighter and opt for a 1/8 of an ounce jig head. Finally, a 3/8 of an ounce jig head works in most cases. It will keep the bait on the bottom, ready for hungry flounder. If you're casting in super shallow water, you can use a pop cork. The bait won't be all the way to the bottom, but it will still be close enough for the flounder to reach. A double setup, with a 3/8 of an ounce jig head on the bottom and a 1/8 of an ounce jig head a foot away, can produce some great catches. Our favorite ambush predators can't resist movement and strong scent. They can get timid if you bump into them with your setup, but move around the bottom while still in their line of sight, and it's only a matter of time before you get bit. The general rule is to retrieve slowly, whether it's live bait or artificial. You want to give the flounder time to see it and chase it. Especially with the Berkeley gulp, make sure to retrieve the line slowly, letting it dance along the bottom and become an irresistible lure. You can also try the twitch pause strategy. All you have to do is jerk the rod twice, lower the rod tip, and slowly retrieve the slack. When using a double rig, you will need to move your rod with each jerk and bounce, making sure your bait hits the bottom. Keep in mind that double rigs are less sensitive, so it may take a little practice to spot a bite. If offshore wrecks and reefs are your playground, try vertical fishing with a strong smelling bucktail. Flounder fishing is becoming increasingly popular, and Texas is the best place to try it. Flounder swim close to shore at night to feed, and you can catch them using a simple hook, which looks like a trident. This is a fun way to experience flounder fishing in a whole new way. There are plenty of flounder along the Atlantic and Gulf coasts, but there are some hot spots that stand out. You can target flounder in brackish and saltwater, around bays, estuaries, mudflats, marshes, coastal areas, and offshore. Here are some fishing spots not to be missed. Flounder are members of the suborder Pleuronectoideae, which includes several families to which flounder can belong: Acheropsetidae, Bothidae, Pleuronectidae, Paralichthiidae, and Samaridae. However, mid-Atlantic anglers need only be concerned with summer flounder from the family Paralichthiidae. Outside our area, flounder are primarily found in estuaries and coastal waters along the Atlantic and Gulf coasts. In the Atlantic, they roam the inshore and offshore waters between Nova Scotia and the east coast of Florida. Flounder have the characteristic funny appearance that most flatfish have. Of course, they are flat and swim sideways on the ground. This is why the flounder's eyes are angled so that they are both on the upward-facing side of their body. Flounder also have the interesting nickname chameleons of the sea because of their camouflage abilities. All species have brown bodies, white bellies, facing down, and are covered with eye-like spots. However, the shape of the spots and the side on which the eyes develop vary by species. Summer flounder have about 10 to 14 large spots, and they always face left. Caution: Paralichthiidae flounder are also known for their large, sharp teeth. The average weight of a summer flounder is 3 to 6 pounds. The width of a flounder is usually half its length. The average length of a summer flounder is 15 to 22 inches. The lifespan of a flounder is about 12 to 14 years. They reach sexual maturity at about 2 to 3 years. The mid-Atlantic is where records for flounder are set. The largest summer flounder ever caught was 24.3 pounds by Monica Oswald off the coast of New Jersey in 2007, but the record was disqualified because the rod was placed over the side of the boat, in violation of ICAFA regulations. Summer flounder is open season year-round in the Chesapeake Bay, and most tidal waters. The Potomac River tributaries are an exception, however, as the Potomac River Fisheries Commission sets a recreational fishing season there. As for the best time to fish for flounder, this largely depends on migration. If you follow our fishing reports, you should have a good idea of when flounder will be in bays and coastal waters. Flounder migrate offshore in late fall to winter to spawn, so the best time for beginners to fish for flounder is from spring to fall when they move to estuaries and nearshore waters. The ideal time to think about fishing for flounder in the fall on the coast is when the flounder move from the back bays to the estuaries, as flounder will be in abundance in these areas as well as the estuaries in the spring. Here is how the seasons break down: summer, good in coastal bays and estuaries and coastal waters near shipwrecks and reefs. Each season is different and any of these areas can be most productive. Pay attention to fishing reports to see where it is hot and when. Fall, good in coastal bays, estuaries and coastal waters close to shore. Flounder are best caught in the fall when the fish migrate into or around the mouths of coastal bays as the fish begin their migration. You can catch many small, undersized flounder like this, so make sure you know the minimum sizes and regulations in the area you are fishing. Flounder are managed by NOAA Fisheries, the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council, and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. Their websites provide information on recreational and commercial flounder regulations. While there is plenty of narrow water fishing, you will usually find real record-setting doormats around shipwrecks and reefs 10 to 25 miles offshore. However, this type of fishing can be difficult for beginners because you need an ocean-worthy boat, or to get on a party boat, and then there are a lot of obstacles, currents, and winds to deal with in early spring. Flounder are often found in very shallow water, sometimes just a foot or two deep, in coastal bays. But as the warm weather sets in, most bay and estuary anglers will find flounder in depths ranging from 5 to 30 feet. The best way to find the right depth is to follow a drift that takes you over a steep drop. Once you've gotten a few bites and have a good idea of the depth at which flounder congregate, you can settle in and focus your efforts. Regardless of location, it helps to adjust your target depth based on the tide. A rising tide means most flounder will be found in shallower water. When the tide goes out, flounder move into deeper water like canals. There are a few annual flounder hotspots in the mid-Atlantic that we've focused on in previous fish talks. Check out these fishing tips if you want to catch giant flounder like this one. Photo courtesy of Steve Shad. When it comes to flounder fishing, you have a lot of options when it comes to how to catch flounder. The most popular flounder fishing methods include bottom drifting and fly fishing, but we recommend starting by reading Kiss Flounder Fishing to see some of the basic tips you need to know. Where you choose to fish for flounder will determine the best choice of bait, tackle, and techniques, depending on the bay, estuary, or ocean. If you want to fish for flounder in bays and estuaries or other shallow waters, read How to Fish for Flounder in Delmarva Bays and Estuaries and How to Catch Flounder in Shallow Water. Or if you prefer to try deeper ocean waters, read Deepwater Doormats, 5 Tips for Catching Flounder at Ocean Reef Sites. A grouper/squid sandwich is a great bait combination for beginners. Cut a strip of squid into a V shape and add a grouper to the hook. Live finger mullet is good in the fall, the bigger the better, for giant flounder. Fishing near reefs and shipwrecks requires heavier gear. Use 30 to 50 hooks on 3 feet of 30-pound line and 4 to 8 ounces of weight. Double bottom rig for drifting a leader or bucktail, a relatively light leader or bucktail, 1/4 to 1/8 ounce, an 8-inch top line, and a 24 to 30-inch bottom line with a heavier leader or bucktail, 2 to 5 ounces. Use fluorocarbon in the 15 to 20 pound test range attached to a running line, usually braided, with a double knot. A rod and reel, spinning or conventional, weighing between 15 and 30 pounds. For those using lures, these will work. A 1/2 to 2 ounce lure with a soft plastic body 4 to 6 inches long. A lure that bounces along the bottom is a great choice for flounder. Keep in mind that when fly fishing, most anglers use a slightly lighter lure, around 10 to 20 pounds. Are you ready to get out on the water and try your hand at flounder fishing? We certainly hope so. And when you're ready to expand your fishing range even further, check out all of our articles in our beginner fishing series Flounder, Doormat. We all have different names for them depending on where you live. Whatever they are, we all know that they are fun, aggressive, and delicious predatory fish that can be targeted in a variety of situations. Any good angler knows that before learning how to catch flounder or any fish, it is important to understand the fish on a biological level. This will give us key information about the fish's behavior, where they will be found, and how they respond to certain baits. When it comes to flounder, it is important to remember that they are bottom-dwelling fish that are highly predatory in nature. Flounder tend to hide in sand or mud, with only their eyes barely visible, and will change their color to match their surroundings, making them extremely difficult fish to see. Flounder are opportunistic feeders, meaning they are quick to take advantage of any bait or leftover food that they find appealing. Although the eyes of a flounder are small, they are the primary means by which the fish find food. Flounder tend to have different tastes depending on the area they inhabit. In general, a flounder's diet consists of shrimp, crabs, smaller flounder, and bait fish such as sardines, herring, mullet, and mud skipper. In the United States, flukes can be caught as far north as Maine, as far south as Florida, and as far west as Texas. Now that you know a little more about flounder, it's time to teach you how to target and catch more flounder. When fishing for flounder, it's important to consider key factors including tides, weather, water temperature, and location. The first thing to remember is that feeder flounder need strategic spots with good currents to feed on. Flounder tend to hide under the bottom, rocks, or other structures and blend in with their surroundings. Moving water is important for flounder as it will push bait fish, shrimp, and crabs, right over the fish and into their strike zone. Areas with good tidal movement such as piers, creeks, and channels are great places to start when targeting flounder. Once you have found a spot with good water movement, one thing to remember is that flounder will not hold the fastest current, instead they prefer to lie near current breaks where they can lie comfortably. The next thing to consider is the weather, as this can directly affect the location of the fish, the current or tide, and the location of the bait. Water temperature can be very important when targeting flounder. Generally, water temperatures below 58 degrees will cause flounder to move offshore near shipwrecks and rock piles. Water temperatures above 60 degrees can be a green light for targeting flounder in the inshore area. As we have mentioned, location is very important when targeting flounder. It is important to find a spot that has a combination of structure, current, and a good mud or sand bottom. Another thing to remember when fishing for flounder is that when you catch one, make sure to stay there, as flounder tend to move and school. Next, we'll talk about how to fish for flounder with artificial lures. Artificial lures are extremely popular among the best flounder anglers, and for good reason, as they are extremely effective and help keep pesky bait thieves to a minimum. When selecting a bait arsenal for flounder, it's important to keep a variety of baits to suit the fishing conditions. Deer tails, spoons, and curly-tailed grubs are all must-haves when preparing to fish for flounder with artificial lures. Some of the best artificial lures for targeting flounder are scented, perhaps the most popular in this category being gulp shrimp. However, other scented paddle tails or jerkbaits can also be effective.